This is an investigative report addressing the most negative aspects affecting modern game development, specifically the deterioration of realistic graphics and the manufactured increase in computing cost. I am Kevin Jimenez, the founder of Threat Interactive, a new game production studio aiming to unlock the full potential this next generation of gaming can provide. And we'll show just how by the end of this video. There are three interconnected factors that need to be addressed: creativity, performance, and visuals. Let's begin with creativity. Several videos online are already bringing awareness to the decreasing quality of gameplay, open worlds, and the microtransactions affecting the majority of games.
The two biggest video game makers in America now make most of their money not from people buying games, but on subscriptions and spending within those games.
In fact, Electronic Arts and Take-Two Interactive both make a staggering 75% of their money from what's called microtransactions.
However, I personally loathe the popular critique that photorealistic games are not fun, they lack art style, and we need worse graphics to fix it. This defeatist attitude is a byproduct of modern development, not visual progress. As industry game developer veterans put it, one thing you do is 10 things you don't. Currently, graphics dominate the do list, leaving gameplay and art style in the don't category. Graphics are currently in a chaotic state, but once the entire developer industry can easily create highly performant photorealism within their engines, competition can begin to solely focus on art direction and gameplay. But recent opportunities for outstanding games with captivating stories and incredible gameplay have been tarnished by the next two factors. 30 FPS on next-gen consoles is unacceptable for many reasons. It appears choppy and promotes a reliance on accessibility such as motion blur. 30 FPS also induces extreme judder and motion on numerous screens. With only 30 frames, the quality of gameplay logic and basic responsiveness falls short, especially when tons of other titles offer that same basic responsiveness. There are numerous 8th generation console titles that ran near photorealistic visuals at 60 FPS, and that was on 2013 2 teraflop hardware, so 30 FPS titles like Spider-Man PS4 are kind of excused here. But modern studios are churning out these half-baked games with absurd requirements, creating an illusion that 13 teraflop 2021 architecture isn't powerful enough for basic photorealistic performance standards set years ago. This leads us to our final issue. The basic standard of 60 FPS is only offered at the cost of our next and biggest problem: visuals. I firmly advocate for photorealism, but the industry is advancing in it in a manner that is worthless during basic movement, through a cancer in real-time rendering. A graphics programming scapegoat that is destroying every game in its path. It's called TAA, and that stands for Temporal Anti-Aliasing, and this includes Upscalers. There are great videos trying to bring awareness about this, but Digital Foundry has an ignorant video that is quickly spreading inaccurate information that is damaging real-time rendering. I will expose false narratives as I show why TAA has ruined modern optimization trends in conjunction with an abusive use of the power offered in current generation consoles. TAA and Upscalers stem from anti-aliasing, effects that aim to mimic the benefits of 4K plus rendering, because 4K 60 FPS on affordable hardware, including 9th generation consoles, isn't feasible. True 4K or higher rendering ensures smooth edges on objects, better sampling on textures, thin objects, and specular highlights. As you decrease the resolution, stair-stepping aliasing emerges, and thin details on meshes and specular highlighting breaks apart. FXAA addresses stair-stepping for a cheap cost but introduces noticeable blur on the entire image. SMAA eliminates these same edges without any blur, making it much more superior. In fact, the only advantage 4K downsample to 1080p versus 1080p with just SMAA applied is thin detail and specular sampling. But modern TAA is designed to run at any resolution by jittering the rendering view in 8 or more positions as frames are generated. After pixel reprojection logic is calculated and designed, the past frames are combined, creating an 8K-like resolution addressing thin, undersampled objects and specular highlighting. But all versions of these designs have several issues. Temporal designs are destructive to object or character motion within view. The problems I'm about to show aren't usually visible under a slower threshold of motion, which is why the industry markets with slow cinematic trailers or graphical showcases. But motion produced from gameplay gets annihilated with ghosting, blur, and smearing visuals. This is why still or slow image quality comparisons by major tech influencers are both worthless and misleading. What's the point in playing a realistic game that looks like this during basic player interactions? YouTube compression conveniently hides these effects of TAA and is usually mistaken for video compression artifacts. The 4K on YouTube resembles native uncompressed 1080p more than actual native uncompressed 4K. Chances are you're playing games through an HDMI or better, meaning your game's image quality is uncompressed. Temporal solutions in motion degrade resolution similar to low bitrate video compression.
So having TAA on your gameplay is like adding compression to your gaming experience. Because of current hardware prices that aren't changing anytime soon, 1080p and 1440p remain the most consumer-friendly target resolutions. But TAA ruins these resolutions the most. TAA and Upscalers not only ruin affordable gaming resolutions, but also damage luxury resolutions for those with enthusiast-grade graphic GPUs. TAA and Upscalers are often bundled with ugly sharpeners that fail to fix ghosting or restore the original clarity and detail stripped away from smearing. The FTAA subreddit, up until the creation of the r/motion clarity subreddit, remained the only online community where consumers could finally speak loud against the industry's oxymoron stance on realistic graphics, and they've listed hundreds of games with forced TAA, with recent titles throwing out traditional AA options for upscaling methods only. Remember the SMAA versus 4K comparisons earlier? You could get the same sampling quality on thin and specular by reusing a single pass frame, which means long ghosting trails, blur, and smearing could be eliminated. I have personally compiled several pieces of data showing these temporal methods could be redesigned to prevent all these hideous motion issues, which are listed in the video description. But clear and good TAA will never become mainstream because the smeary nature of current temporal solutions are being exploited to cover up lazy and cheap development practices. In hundreds of game titles, if you can fully disable temporal solutions, you are punished severely with numerous rendering problems. Temporal dithering and frame blending dependent rendering aspects. Bloom. Soft shadows. Denoise replacement for ray trace shadows. Ambient occlusion. Screen space contact shadows. Vegetation, fur, hair. Screen space reflections. Global illumination. Translucent materials. Clouds. Dithering to hide geometric camera clipping. Mesh introductions. And ray trace reflections. Strip away TAA in several engines and these effects transform into an incomprehensible mess or reveal a poor approach to an aspect of rendering. These are the supposed fixes and optimizations offered by temporal anti-aliasing and upscalers. But an industry lie perpetuated by Digital Foundry's TAA video is the claim that TAA and upscalers enable developers to optimize these effects by rendering them at lower resolutions, allowing TAA to smooth them with supposedly no cost. But if you do some digging, you'll discover older deferred titles from under a decade ago, rendering the same basic effects independently of temporal frame smearing with similar or better performance and or similar better visual quality. And guess what? If you need extra performance from a demanding feature, that feature can be programmed to run at a lower resolution and or include its own temporal accumulation without blurring the entire frame. Modern implementations of last gen's basic visuals perform more poorly because studios leverage the power of ninth generation consoles to cut financial costs on legitimate optimization processes for faster releases. The financial savings don't end there though. TAA and upscalers enable studios to save money by integrating these popular and fully developed temporal algorithms into their engines instead of investing in the development of genuinely high-performing and self-resolving effects. Since TAA, a large portion of rendering advancement papers tie in TAA or mention an upscaler such as DLSS as a required condition to solve some issue with the design. Speaking of DLSS, people only label it better than native because DLSS is always compared to native with TAA applied. Anything compared to the worst case scenario will appear improved. The so-called best TAA algorithms are needlessly expensive and brand specific. First, I have a bone to pick with DLAA. DLAA uses too many pass frames for reconstruction, which causes two problems: long ghosting trails, and significant blurring in motion compared to native with SMAA or stationary output. It also fails to smooth stair-stepping in motion compared to SMAA. Applying Circus Method with the newest DLL provides much better results, even though both examples are rendered at 1080p. But Circus Method isn't cheap. DLA at 1080p on a desktop 12GB 3060 costs 0.75 milliseconds. Circus Method bumps it up to 2.44 milliseconds. Image quality is far from poor, but its proprietary nature, cost, and Blue Moon AI mistakes makes it unreliable for the industry. XeSS 1.3 native AA mode suffers from the same problems as DLIA, but costs 1.44 milliseconds at 1080p on the same machine. Applying Circus Method gets image quality almost indistinguishable from Circus Method DLSS, but costs 4.6 milliseconds. Next is Unreal's TSR. It's a little more complex because it implements the circus method natively, but I'll give it the fairest shot possible by using UE 5.4's more optimized implementation. It's easy to appear superior to Unreal's TAA, but TSR suffers from a specific hazy fizzle appearance that video compression doesn't present well enough to pair with my criticism of that aspect. But besides whether or not you think it looks fine or not, the biggest issue again is the cost when set by the maximum quality settings for anti-aliasing. It puts TSR 10 times the cost of TAA and stands around 3 milliseconds on a 3060 at native 1080p. That's the difference between 60 FPS and 50 FPS. Still not convinced it's too expensive? Let's look at the Decima TAA again from 2017. These are PS4 timings, and they didn't go with SMA because of the cost combined with temporal reprojection, so they went with a sharpened FXAA fallback for their 2-frame TAA instead. But what if they used SMA instead? We would get 0.36 milliseconds versus both unreasonable TSR timings. With such a low base cost, and these results at 30 FPS, if we wanted to keep AAA cost under 1 millisecond on modern affordable hardware, we could catapult the quality even further with 60 FPS and use that 0.73 milliseconds of headroom with aspects such as SMA or advanced motion vectors. Meanwhile, if TSR was put under the same scenario on screen, I guarantee you it would look like its slime show even at 60 FPS. These are TAA Design Requisites that must be combined to keep TAA computations costs low and stop it from producing the poor image quality we've settled for more than a decade now. But effect dependency is preventing progress. Unreal has long been founded on this dependency, and still heavily does. UE5 is set to worsen this industry problem because it's going to dominate the production of titles coming this generation, and Epic and its partners like CD Projekt Red have no concern over this matter. The Unreal documentation goes so far to claim that FXAA results in a loss of fidelity compared to their temporal methods, which you should be aware by now is only a half-truth. They also provide misleading information about TSR, presenting it as a method to achieve near 4K quality with just 1080p input. Of course, they showcase this with a stationary example. In reality, 540p with sufficient temporal jitter and accumulation can resolve an 8K resolution image with a stationary camera. Out of context fairy tales like this are damaging game development.
Another out of context narrative Epic Games is pushing is that Nanite
has a faster way to render geometry and aims to eliminate the LOD pop-in association. Nanite does not increase performance unless you abuse your scene with extreme overdraw. I've compiled many tests on the specific Unreal forums thread that proves this. Nanite can cost as much as next-gen lighting, and pop-in will still remain a part of your gaming experience because shadows, skeletal meshes, foliage, and open-world partitions will still introduce pop. Even Brian Karras has stated Nanite can have worse performance on optimized meshes, but stated users still enable it to save disk space. This comment is a perfect example showing Epic Games' flawed position on what modern games really need.
It doesn't matter if your highly detailed open world game is 100 megabytes, but can't perform at a decent resolution and frame rate. Optimized meshes don't even require Nanite compression, but studios who use Nanite save themselves money by not investing in quality LODs.
And not investing in mesh introduction transitional effects that would give you better results. A good practice used on optimized game meshes is the use of bitmaps for subpixel detail, such as the words on these quixel stones. Nanite encourages and is designed to render subpixel detail geometrically instead of textures, which causes extreme pixel crawl and artifacting, which, you guessed it, can only be fixed by intense temporal frame smearing, creating a manufactured and limited scenario where flawed TAA appears as the better option. I understand the time and quality issues related to making good LODs, but Nanite is the worst solution to this problem.
UE5 will dominate all other options because this engine excels in support.
I'm talking asset packages formatted specifically for Unreal, hundreds of documentations, shared public content, overwhelming logic support. Epic Games provides hundreds of free, basic, but high-quality assets when you use Unreal. Every major third-party vendor with game-related software always prioritizes support for Unreal. Unreal offers a unique amount of support for critical tools for basic workflows like animation and debuggers. It's intuitive to use in comparison with competitor UI and programming designs. For studios, finding individuals to hire is made easy due to the widespread popularity and adoption of the engine. It's an advantage Unreal has acquired by simply existing as long as it has the way it has. That makes it the go-to for software and digital media. But the engine designs and its leadership should not be at the forefront of next-gen graphics development for critical reasons I'll outline right now. Epic provides 30 FPS presets in Unreal because they don't believe it's inadequate on 9th generation consoles. Look at Fortnite 5.4's performance. The design is CPU intensive, sure, but the art style is simplistic enough to even with GI it should provide a computational advantage. Yet it's one of the hardest games to run on the GPU side even with a 60 FPS or high preset enabled. If this is the best performance offered by the engine's creators, of course it'll defend 30 FPS when basic realism or complex stylized visuals come into play. Epic has no experience making realistic games. The Matrix Awakens is not a game. It's a visually exciting 30 FPS demo with enough motion blur to hide the 30 FPS screen judder. Consumers who didn't own a 9th generation console at the time saw the 60 FPS tag on the YouTube presentation and assumed that was the case. People who did experience the demo firsthand were given basic interaction through a locked aiming system that wouldn't expose the fluidity issues of 30 FPS. Epic has no problem abusing the flaws of their TAA or temporal upscalers such as DLSS for several effects I've shown throughout this video. Epic defaults their engine to rely on temporal smearing when very few TAA independent features remain undocumented and hidden behind loopholes most unsuspecting developers will never find. They shamelessly promote heavy and blurry temporal upscaling as a viable solution on 9th generation consoles. And the biggest problem with Epic and their perspective on game development is that Fortnite drives their motivations for Unreal's development. Fortnite is a game with a very unique and uncommon problem the engine has to accommodate for. It's an open world map with a dynamic time of day and weather. This means real-time GPU calculations need to be computed per frame to account for those dynamic changes. What makes these calculations so much more expensive and unreal is the fact that Fortnite's entire environment is destructible. This is why more realistic open worlds from 8th generation console titles have no problem with day or weather cycles even though they don't use light maps. Because their environment, or in other words primary source of indirect lighting, is mostly static. These games use lighting solutions that bait small, memory-efficient indirect lighting hints that your GPU doesn't have to compute. This way your GPU just calculates how these pre-computed hints correlate to the dynamic lights and shadows. These lighting systems have their own limitations, but not a whole lot that can't be accelerated or overcome using 9th gen's hardware full potential. Fortnite's GI, which is Unreal's Lumen, can't let developers with the common environmental properties bake any high-quality indirect lighting hints that save you performance. Unreal's light maps are uninterpolatable and have serious leaking problems that can only be mitigated with stupid amounts of VRAM memory. So many Unreal games are wasting performance for basic visual standards because your GPU is computer whether or not a Fortnite wall has been destroyed or what that wall looks like, etc. Lumen is noisy without TAA because it isn't designed to use stable or high-quality indirect lighting hints. So top that inefficiency off in games with other Epic game technologies like Nanite, Virtual Shadow Maps, and TSR, and we're left with games created faster than ever and as inefficient and as terrible in motion as ever. When this happens over and over again, it standardizes, which is why other studios are following these inefficient designs for their mostly static games that could use faster systems. Epic Games' indifference towards underperforming or poor visuals that appear in third-party Unreal games is the statement that big-budget studios should be customizing Unreal source code to provide more appropriate designs for their titles. True, but it's almost a catch-22. If a studio decides to use Unreal, it shows they lack the funding, interest, and/or innovation to manage the graphics themselves. This is exactly what happens when established studios throw out proprietary engines in favor of what Unreal offers. I have one more problem with Epic that I need to cover. Unreal is used for the automotive, film, simulation, and construction industries. That wouldn't be a problem if Epic wasn't constantly accounting for this user base and muddling Unreal with algorithms not meant for consumer-efficient real-time rendering. Amidst of these issues, I gave Epic the benefit of the doubt and made a feedback thread on the Unreal developer forums 12 months ago, requesting the prioritization of game development and a larger focus on temporal smearing independence within their various effects. In only 11 months, it was voted as the #1 feedback from developers, replacing the previous #1 feedback thread made 3 years ago. Epic released several Unreal versions, including nothing pertaining to the thread's request, despite a solid number of educated developers ready to progress beyond Epic's limited vision for this generation of gaming. This studio was created to begin the production of an intense action game based on a new IP consisting over 700 pages of detailed story and scenarios. Our game is conventional due to only requiring a mostly static world with dynamic lights, making our goals much more relevant to many developers and gamers. We have paused the production of our game, so our unrivaled passion for motion clarity and performance standards for untainted photorealism can be met, which is why our solution is to create a custom Unreal via crowdfunding, with custom systems that directly address the giant issues stated in this video. Don't think a custom Unreal engine will have an impact on developers? Take the finals for example. It performs so much better than other UE5 games, people defend Epic's UE5 and solely blame studios for any worse performing titles. But the final's extreme destructive nature made using Nanite and the associated virtual shadow maps impossible. And most people don't know that the finals uses NVIDIA's custom UEFI branch to make use of its lower quality but much faster dynamic GI, DDGI, instead of Epic's Lumen. The finals performance doesn't contradict our views on Epic's Unreal, it only proves our point. NVIDIA's custom UEFI branch is exactly how we want to execute ours, but as of now, we need funding to motivate and hire skilled graphic programmers. Our engine will always be accessible for review and use under Epic's GitHub restrictions. Unlike industry leaders, we do not believe the future of graphics is dependent on blurry or expensive temporal smearing. But that future is only possible if you care enough and support our vision for modern graphics. So sponsors, investors, we're ready to begin if we've convinced you. Threat Interactive, my studio, will be giving more details about how we intend to execute our plan in our next video. Until then, thank you for watching this one. And please like and subscribe to our channel, and share this message on your favorite Discord server, subreddit, and social media so we can start elevating the future of gaming standards together.